Coming up tonight, the tourism minister says tourists aren't to blame for a recent spike in COVID-19 cases. Meanwhile, we hear from the new Minister of Health and vendors on Arawak Key and Potters Key slam government for forcing their businesses closed.
Our news is brought to you by Alive.
Welcome to Our News and thanks for joining us. Topping news tonight, a dramatic rise in coronavirus cases which increased by 21. This brings the number of cases to 174. According to the Ministry of Health, case number 154 is a resident of New Providence, while the other 20 cases are residents of Grand Bahama. Further details of the 21 additional cases were unable to be confirmed at the time of the release of this report. The report released by the Ministry of Health, of course. Investigations are ongoing and a complete update of details will be published at a later date. New Providence has a total of 101 cases, while Grand Bahama has 59, 4 people in hospital. 3,672 COVID-19 tests have been completed. That means 1,027 cases have been conducted in a 24-hour period. On the heels of the government's decision to close borders to commercial flights and vessels to the U.S., Tourism Minister Dionisio de Aguilar admits that officials were not strict enough on Bahamians traveling abroad. However, he insisted the recent surge in cases has nothing to do with visitors coming in. Brittany McDermott reports.
Tourism Minister Dionisio de Aguilar shooting down suggestions that visitors contributed to the recent surge in COVID-19 cases locally. Since the country's borders reopened to international commercial travel on July 1st, there have been 49 confirmed cases of COVID-19. 14 cases have a confirmed history of travel. Details are pending on the travel history of 12 cases. Following the ban on commercial flights and vessels traveling from all countries, excluding the United Kingdom, the European Union, and Canada, de Aguilar admitted that in hindsight, more could have been done to mitigate the spread of COVID-19.
But I don't think anyone has shown me any evidence, at least, that it was because of foreign visitors coming into the country that we had a growth in cases. So I think we had that that group of protocols working well. It's just that maybe with hindsight, we were not strict enough on Bahamians going in and out of the country.
De Aguilar added that there is no doubt the travel ban will have a significant impact on the tourism industry. 82% of the country's tourist arrivals come from the United States. As a result, he says the ministry will now have to rethink its strategy relating to movement in and out of the country. The tourism minister was asked if he's expecting any backlash from the U.S.
I don't anticipate any pushback from the United States. I think they see what we did and why we did it. And once the numbers from Grand Bahama settle, they will understand why we did what we did.
There are currently no flights coming in from Europe and 1 flight per week from Canada. De Aguilar also hit back at the opposition leader who said the recent spike in cases was the result of how government handled the reopening of borders.
I completely disagree with them. It was not a tourist-related matter. Unfortunately, citizenry took advantage of their increased ability to travel, and you will see that all of the cases are really domestic grown, and the foreign visitors are seemingly to date not impacted us. Unfortunately, you could not create 2 separate economies, and you couldn't create 2 separate sets of rules.
Reporting for Our News, I'm Brittany McDermott.
The Public Hospitals Authority reporting that an emergency medical technician operating out of New Providence tested positive for COVID-19 after developing symptoms. PHA officials say the EMT has no history of travel and exposure points toward community-based spread. The surveillance unit of the Ministry of Health is carrying out ongoing contact tracing in this regard. To date, 10 people connected to the EMT have been placed in quarantine. PHA ambulances and the impacted EMS locations have been professionally cleaned and sanitized according to officials. EMS services continue as usual and may be contacted by calling 911 or 919. The PHA urged the public to utilize EMS for emergencies only, especially during the COVID-19 pandemic. Mechanical engineer Renward Wells today received his instruments of appointment as the new health minister, While critics question his ability to head that ministry amid a global pandemic, Wells insisted you don't have to be a doctor to be the health minister. Kyle Joaquin reports.
Health is not just the Minister of Health or the technical professionals or the Prime Minister or the elected officials. It is all of us together in the Bahamas, protecting ourselves.
It's his third cabinet portfolio since the F&M's win in 2017. Renwood Wells has gone from Minister of Agriculture and Marine Resources in 2017 to Minister of Transport a year later to now Minister of Health. His appointment comes as the country battles a surge in COVID-19 cases, a task Wells says he's up for despite having no medical background.
There are lots of countries around the globe at this point in time who have ministers of health who are not doctors, and some of them have been doing quite well with the pandemic. We have Singapore that has an electrical engineer as the Minister of Health. I happen to be a mechanical engineer, and I think the response of Singapore in regards to how it's handled the COVID-19 pandemic has been excellent.
Wells fills the post more than 2 months after former Health Minister Dr. Dwayne Sands stepped down after taking responsibility for 6 permanent residents landing in the country at a time when hundreds of Bahamians were stuck abroad. Prime Minister Dr. Hubert Minnis served as interim Minister of Health, but has received criticism over his inability to make himself available for questions from the media or for meetings with key stakeholders like the Consultant Physician Staff Association, which has repeatedly expressed disappointment over the lack of consultation with Minnis. Wells said as the competent authority, Minnis just did not have the time.
And so he would not have had time to be able to meet with them in that time frame. I'm here now. I will meet with them and hear their concerns and seek to address them going forward.
Wells's old portfolio as Minister of Transport and Local Government now falls into the lap of Labour Minister Dion Folks, who once held responsibility for the Post Office, Port Department and Maritime Authority.
Given my experience in the Ministry of Labour, I don't foresee an issue with handling both ministries.
And with the economic fallout from the COVID-19 pandemic bringing about layoffs in many sectors, Folks says government is still in talks with business owners in an effort to keep as many people on the job as possible.
We are going to do all that we can. The Minister of Finance could probably speak more specifically to the financial situation, but we are going to do all that we can to ensure that each Bahamian family who is affected by COVID-19 have some level of support.
Now, when it comes to those Ministry of Health press conferences, Wells says he's going to continue to let the health officials take the lead on them, but he does have plans to attend quite a few of them. But for now, reporting from Government House for Our News, I'm Kyle Joaquin.
Thanks, Kyle. Opposition Leader Philip Davis slamming the recently announced measures on Grand Bahama as being harsh on Bahamians. He says too often the Prime Minister dictates to Bahamians.
Threatening and punishing Bahamians is not the solution to this health crisis.
Davis slammed government's new measures as being harsh on Bahamians who he says aren't to blame for the recent spike in cases. Instead, Davis says the focus should be on the border.
It is not Bahamians who are at fault for this sudden rise in new infections. It is the government's protocols that have been full of loopholes. It is also increasingly obvious that the lack of proper enforcement at the borders has contributed to the resurgence of COVID-19.
The opposition leader says he doesn't support the border staying open for private crafts. He says that provision shows preferential treatment for the rich. He also doesn't support the recent beach and park closure.
The Prime Minister continues to focus on criticizing Bahamians. When fresh air and exercise are critical to a nation under great stress, he closes the beaches rather than set up guidelines to make them safe as possible.
Davis also slammed the Prime Minister over a photo that circulated on social media showing Minnis gathered with a group inside a room. In the photos, his mask is lowered and others around him aren't wearing masks. During Minnis' Sunday address, he urged Bahamians to wear their masks properly.
He tells us to wear our masks. He tells us to socially distance. That's what he tells us. But what does he do? Quite the opposite.
2 years after he was fired as Parliamentary Secretary in the Ministry of Tourism, Bain and Grantstown MP Travis Robinson was reinstated today. Robinson was relieved of those duties in June 2018 after he and several other F&M MPs voted against the increase in value-added tax to 12%. Now that he's got his old job back, Robinson said he's eager to get back to work with fresh ideas.
One of the things I was pleased by was to put new ideas to the forefront. The minister brings a wealth of experience in his background in the business arena, and being able to present new, fresh, bright, innovative ideas is what I've been able
From a young man.
what I've been able to bring to the board.
Many are questioning Robinson's appointment in light of the grim financial situation the country is now facing due to the COVID-19 pandemic. However, Tourism Minister Dionisio de Aguilar insisted he needs help, adding he has been stretched.
I have tourism, I have aviation, I have 9 agencies of government under my remit. It's a lot of work, and I need the support of a young man's perspective. And there's so many other programs that I would love to do that simply time doesn't permit, just because I'm spread over so much. Attempting, and especially now with the pandemic thrown in, you know, who would have thought 2 months ago we had to develop a program to screen people to come into the country?
An emotional morning at Arawa Key as vendors say their employees were in tears over the Prime Minister's decision to shut them down until further notice. Arawa Key vendors say they feel attacked, while a Potter's Key dock vendor asks Dr. Minnis where is his heart for the small man. George O'Brien reports.
Following the Prime Minister's address on Sunday, shutting down stalls at Arawa Key, stall owners are calling for an explanation as to why they've once again been shut down. According to these stall owners, they stand to lose thousands of dollars in revenue. When our news arrived at Arawa Key this morning, we met members of the Arawa Key Conch, Fish, Fruits, Vegetable and Food Vendors Association locked in a heated meeting. Owner of Curly's Restaurant and Bar, Vincent McDonald, said he was saddened and appalled by the Prime Minister's decision to close restaurants on Arawa Key and Porters Key Dock once again without a promised reopening date.
I met my staff on the bar, at the table, in the kitchen, with tears. In their eyes. As a business owner, what do I do?
McDonald said the decision feels like a personal attack on vendors of Arawa Key.
We are being attacked and we are ready to, we're asking you, sir, to rescind. There's nobody. We are not children. We are businessmen who have spent thousands of dollars. We have lost in the first lot thousands of dollars. Onions, all the perishables, they're rotten. We gave them to what we didn't give to our family members. Our food, there was freezer burn. Our fish, our counts were freezer burn.
The association is expected to draft a letter to the Prime Minister today, according to McDonald, who said if the letter doesn't receive a favorable response, they will have no choice but to take drastic measures. However, Bruno Minnis, the owner of Bruno's Seafood and Steak Bar, said he saw this coming.
The way we doing business out here needs to be a little different than the way we operating. But I saw it coming, so it shouldn't be a surprise to no one out of here.
Priscilla, who was visiting from Florida, was a bit disappointed as she drove through Arawa Key.
It's complicated, but now I have to go back tomorrow because otherwise I can be locked here.
Over on Porters Key, we met a few store owners packing up inventory they had purchased for this week's sales.
Prime Minister, where is your heart for the small man? We just opened up, 2 weeks, a month ago, after 4 months COVID. But actually, we've been doing bad before COVID.
He should give us allowance, because my friend invests a lot of money. They buy extra 20 cases. What they hold on. My other brother buy 100 count. And I mean, just by yesterday, and all of a sudden, out of nowhere, the Prime Minister, what he should have do is give us a few days before closing down the dock. You know what I mean? So we gotta make something back to feed your family.
Reporting for our news, I'm Georgio Bain.
Thanks, Giorgio. Still to come, though. Grand Bahama residents feel singled out. Plus, senators clash over COVID. Stay tuned. Senate got off to a heated start this morning after the opposition sought to raise the Prime Minister's latest national address on COVID-19. The Senate President rejected that request, prompting Senator Fred Mitchell to ask if the Senate is a fantasy land. Jasmine Brown reports.
The opposition sought to raise their concerns about COVID-19. However, that did not happen. Senate President Dr. Mildred Hall Watson started off proceedings by informing senators that opposition members had informed her that they wished to raise the COVID-19 issue and discuss the new rules set out by Prime Minister Dr. Hubert Minnis. But she said the opposition's request did not come an hour before the Senate proceedings. She also insisted the request was also not specific.
It is not a matter that we will take up for discussion this morning.
Her decision did not stop Leader of Opposition Business in the Senate, Fred Mitchell, from weighing in and expressing his displeasure.
Yesterday, the Prime Minister announced a new set of COVID orders. I mean, are we living in fantasy land?
No, we're not. No, we're not.
Is this I'm sorry?
And we're not living in obstruction land.
No, it isn't obstruction. Everyone in the country is talking about this today. And we're going to sit here and pretend as if this doesn't exist.
While Leader of Government Business in the Senate, Carl Bethel, quickly got to his feet to tell Mitchell that if he wanted to talk about the issue, he could do it on a soapbox outside.
He is at liberty at any time to stand up on a podium anywhere in this country and make any comment or criticism of any public document. Okay, the Senate adjourned today for a specific purpose.
But Mitchell did not back down as he insisted he wasn't being critical but inquisitive. He also said it was the Attorney General who should be happy to discuss a matter that has garnered national attention, given the fact that his office helped draft the latest emergency orders.
We can dumb down this institution and make it useless if we wish. What we are seeking to do is to give the government an opportunity, having announced a new set of proposals and procedures yesterday to elucidate the matters for the public. He is in a unique position to share that information.
Yes, that's why he made the presentation.
The Prime Minister made a statement. The orders have to be drafted by the Attorney General. The Attorney General is in a unique position to explain what is the policy. Everyone is talking about it, except us.
Despite Mitchell's arguments, the matter was still not allowed to be raised. Reporting for our news, I'm Jasmine Brown.
Thanks, Jasmine. Grand Bahama residents say they feel singled out after their island was placed under a new curfew starting 3 hours earlier. Many say the island was just starting to show signs of life amid the pandemic.
The 7 p.m. curfew should have been a national curfew, where if we are here on Grand Bahama on a 7 o'clock curfew, then New Providence should have been on a curfew, and other islands should have been on a curfew.
24-year-old Daquan Swain, a lifelong Grand Bahama resident and entrepreneur, isn't alone in his feelings. Many Grand Bahama residents took to social media to complain moments after the island's new curfew was announced.
When Nassau was seeing that influx of cases, we had to suffer the same restrictions and penalties as them, even though we weren't even seeing any cases. So the innocent suffered for the guilty there.
During a Sunday evening national address, Minnis implemented a new curfew of 7 p.m. on Grand Bahamians. The closure of that island's border at midnight on Wednesday, as well as the closure of parks and beaches on the island, was also announced. While New Providence's parks and beaches are also closed, only Grand Bahama is being closed to domestic travel, and only Grand Bahamians will have to be home by 7.
Businesses that were now barely holding on, and they are now just getting an opportunity to, feel some type of normalcy, is now like, what's going to happen now? Are we going to go back on lockdown?
Other measures put in place on Grand Bahama include the closure of indoor dining and fish fries. Jalan Harris, a 29-year-old who recently returned to Grand Bahama after living in New Providence, also feels that Grand Bahama was singled out. Asked whether she felt the border opening was a mistake, the mother of one says she believes many people wanted the borders to reopen.
It was a risk that I guess the Bahamians had been aware of, a risk they was willing to take. So now we have to deal with the consequences.
But other Grand Bahamians, like Chief Councilor of the City of Freeport, Kendall Culmer, thinks the measures were needed. He says Grand Bahamians love to travel, and the July 1st opening showed that.
We do travel a lot, and a lot of persons were actually waiting for the borders to open to get off the island after being locked down for some time. So I guess they were expecting some increase, but the numbers, I think, really spiked high and very quickly.
Still to come, the Senate passes the Road Traffic Amendment Bill. Stay tuned. Welcome back. The Road Traffic Amendment Bill 2019 passed in the Senate this morning. The bill will lengthen jail time and toughen fines for traffic offenses for people who kill while driving dangerously or recklessly. Attorney General Carl Bethel said these offenses previously attracted shameful sentences.
There have been some embarrassingly almost token sentences given by the respective courts. Human life must have more value than that. The right of individuals not to be recklessly, carelessly, or dangerously killed by a motor vehicle being driven in a reckless, careless, or dangerous manner.
Still to come, how COVID is impacting basketball. Stay tuned. The national men's basketball team adjusting its schedule due to COVID-19. Marcellus Hall has that.
The Bahamas Basketball Federation has now found its schedule disrupted in terms of getting its national team, in particular men, getting qualified for a number of the different tournaments around the world. They have now made those adjustments and say it's all systems go based on what FIBA has put forward. The Bahamas Basketball Federation is now trying to adjust its national team programs to the new realities forced by COVID-19. President Mario Boleg saying there was an adjustment to the qualification schedule.
Senior men, as you know, is scheduled to play in November in Washington against the United States and also against Puerto Rico, in Puerto Rico. We will get an update on that on July 31st, whether or not those games will take place in November or will be pushed back to February. It was also scheduled that in February we would play those home games against the United States and Puerto Rico. But if the away games is pushed back to February due to this pandemic, then I guess our home games will be played in June, which is more beneficial for us. We will be able to then have our NBA players home, and I think that would be something that would be of great interest to the Bahamian public to have Buddy and Aiton home at that time playing against the likes of the United States and Puerto Rico.
Boleg adding that the players themselves have bought into the process and remain committed to getting the job done.
Most of them are home now, working out every day and looking at the possibility of going back to their professional leagues and programs and understanding that that in itself is going to have a effect on us because those dates of when those seasons going to start is going to be hindered by the pushback of not completing their season this year. That's why July 31st we are going to get the final word on whether those games are going to be played in November, February, or going to be pushed back some other months. And as soon as we get that, you guys will be the first to be informed about that.
So while there is still some uncertainty, it seems as if the Bahamas Basketball Federation is prepared for whenever the all clear comes along. Reporting for our news, I'm Marcellus Hall.
Thank you for joining us for Our News Tonight. To catch our news on the go, download the Rev Go Play app. On behalf of the entire news team, I'm Jared Higgs. Have a beautiful evening, Bahamas.